Now let's take a look at the core DB architecture itself of the HANA database. So in this core architecture, we have a couple of main servers. One is your index server right about here. Index server plays a very important role because it stores the main data engines. So your row store and column store are stored inside the index server, and it also stores, or it also has all the other engines which are functioning inside of the HANA database. There is another server called the preprocessor server. Preprocessor server helps you to work on the unstructured data when you talk to unstructured data before pushing it into the database. The name server, obviously, as the name goes, it's the owner of all the topology of the server infrastructure. So the name server will know what kind of data is sitting where, if you're doing any partitioning, if you're doing any distribution of data, and also in general the host name and things like that. All of that will be stored inside the name server. So you need all of these functioning just about right to make HANA work. Now let's take a look a little bit deeper inside how SAP HANA index server will work. So let's take UI, for example, and see how a request will come into the database and which are the different engines it will hit while being processed. So let's say you have a UI in some device, whether mobile or a desktop. So let's say you have a web server, and then the information or the service call is routed inside the HANA database. The first stop will be at the session and transaction manager. Now let's take a deeper look. Let's go to the next slide, which has a little bit more information about these engines. I apologize for the slide not being very clear, but I hope you can see. So the service call will come inside, and it will be stopped by the connection and session management. So the session management basically takes care of the creating a session in your browser or in your application to understand who you are and how long you've been accessing the session in terms of a cookie, and then it allows you to access, or then otherwise it pushes you to authentication. So authentication basically takes care of who you are and can you access this particular resource which you are requesting. So what we're talking about is an username and password. So basically it wants to validate whether you are who you are. So naturally it's going to ask you for a username and password, then it's going to go and check inside the database for the credentials. Authorization takes care of internal operations like, okay, you have access to the database, but can you access a specific table? Can you access a specific model? Can you access a specific engine in terms of the roles? The granular internal distribution of authorization is taken care by the authorization manager. When the query comes inside, all the DML statements like insert, select, update, delete, and all those kind of statements are taken care by the SQL processor. And any DDL statements, like for example, when you want to create a table and things like that, then that is pushed to the metadata manager. SAP HANA has a SQL script language. It is a special language which is created natively for HANA. It is basically an extension on your ANSI SQL. So it understands, your database understands SQL, but it also understands SQL script. So you can create application logic and push it into the database using SQL script, and which will make that code very efficient, and it will free up your application layer. Planning engine is used for planning applications, like when you want to plan any financial operations in the database layer, planning engine will help you to do that. The MDX engine is basically multidimensional query. So when you have an OLAP kind of query, you want to talk on the OLAP cube and you want to communicate to an external application, then you can use MDX. For example, MDX is used with MS Excel. Now there are many more engines which you can't see here, but what you can see here is the calculation engine. Internally inside HANA, we have something called the calculation views, which we saw very briefly when we were talking about the packages. This is currently the main artifact or the main modeling artifact which you will create inside of the HANA database. So anything to do with the calculations on a calculation view, that particular part of the query will come into the calculation engine. So we have other engines, like what you can't see here is OLAP engine, which processes all the OLAP queries. Then we have the join engine, which processes the joins, and other engines which we don't have here. Coming down to the persistence layer. Now persistence layer is the one which manages the communication between your RAM and your disk storage, so where you have the data volumes and the transaction volumes. Now persistence layer is responsible for the consistency of the database. Now, so all the asset properties has to be complied, and persistence layer is responsible for doing that. It does that by managing the two different kinds of data. One is the committed data, one is the non-committed data. So all the committed data will come into page management, and all the non-committed data will come into log information. And naturally they are reconciled at a certain stage automatically, even if the user does not commit. We'll take a look at more about persistence and things like that in the persistence topic.